Good morning and welcome to Intro to Google Search Console, a Google Search Console for nonprofit technical SEO. Unfortunately, the initial recording for this webinar did not take, so we're doing a quick do-over, which will have the advantage of being a little quicker and to the point. Unfortunately, disadvantage of less community participation, which we had a lot of with our fabulous 30-odd participants, and without the participation of our fabulous co-host, Catherine, though I'll certainly give a shout out to Catherine for all of the work she has done on this. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to cover. So we're going to talk about why you might care about Google Search Console, what it can do for you, getting it connected to your site, and then we're going to spend most of our time looking at Google Search Console Live. No Q&A in this particular recording. Who am I? I'm the voice out of the ether. I am Laura S. Quinn. I am an independent consultant who specializes in helping nonprofits build websites. I do website strategy and I am a coach and guide. So I am somebody with a really wide knowledge of website processes and working with vendors on new sites and sites over time. I'm also the editor of the nonprofit website Insider, which is a newsletter specifically for people within nonprofit organizations who manage websites. And Catherine Whittier was part of the creation of this website. So 100 kudos to her for that. She is a specialist in search engine optimization and Google Search Console in a way that I am absolutely not. So I do a little bit of work in, if you want high-level thoughts about search engine optimization, but if you want detailed thoughts, then Catherine is really your woman, and you can see her link here at wostrategies.com. All right, let's dive in. Why Google Search Console? Why are we talking about this at all? So Google Search Console is a really useful tool in doing what's called search engine optimization. Search engine optimization is when you are thinking about how to get your website ranked high on tools like Google or Bing or the AI tools also, so like ChatGPT, are also using the same type of processes that are thought about by the search engines. So Google Search Console obviously is specific to Google, but it gives you information which is useful to all of them. It gives you information specific to whether and how your site is indexed, which is a critical first step for search engine optimization. So indexing is whether or not your pages are showing up at all. So there are other consoles. So for instance, Bing has a search console as well, which is also very useful and has a few, in fact, pros. It offers things that Google doesn't. But if you're going to start with one, Google is a pretty easy one to start with, and it is definitely worth starting somewhere. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about starting by connecting Google Search Console to your website. I apologize for the wall of text here, but one of the things I wanted to show is how good and fairly clear the Google documentation is for this type of things. So this is not, in fact, a full list. There are even more possibilities for connecting your website. But here's a list of a number of ways that you can connect your website with Google Search Console. Probably the easiest ways for most people are if you are already using Google Analytics, you can simply connect the two So you can go to Google, you can click through on this link, and it will tell you a way to use your Google Analytics password to hook it up to your Google Search Console account. Another fairly straightforward way is to simply put a little piece of code that Google Search Console will give you into the header on your website. So if you have a developer who has access to the code of your site, that is a matter of 5 or 10 minutes to paste this piece of code into the header of your site, and that will link you up to Google Search Console. So there's a bunch of different ways that are likely a matter of, could be 5-10 minute effort, probably is not more than an hour effort to connect it up to your website to immediately get in and see your site. So seeing your site in Google Search Console, what does that mean? Let's get in and look at it. All right. So let me just go to the right place here. So here is Google Search Console. This will be somewhat familiar looking to people who use other Google search tools. Other Google tools. You will see things like the left nav bar. Google is a fan of left nav bars. Here in the drop-down box is all of the websites that you have access to. I have a couple because I am a consultant. You may only have one. And you start on this overview page, which is actually a really useful look at what all is in Google Search Console. So in fact, I'm going to click through it, or I'm sorry, just scroll through it to show you what all is here before we dive in more detail into some of these things. So, performance. Performance is, so it's a little bit of an awkward word, I think, for this. Performance actually means how many people have clicked through on search terms to find your site on Google. So for instance, on this day, Wednesday, June 5th, 70 people clicked through on Google to this particular site, which is the Crime Victims Help New York site. So, and this look is very typical. It just goes up during the week and down on the weekends. So on Saturdays, not that many people clicked. So if you want to get more detail on that information, so this is true for pretty much everything in this console, you can click through and you can see, in particular, something that might be useful. You can see what keywords people searched through to get to the site. So for instance, how long does it take to get crime victim compensation was one of the top keywords here. Now, this information is a little bit iffy. And if you're going to go in a lot of detail into search engine keywords, there's reasons why you might really want to use one of the paid tools. So something like Moz, for instance. If you're only doing it a little bit, this may it's certainly better than nothing. But you might want to look into other options. But in fact, that's not what we're talking about today. We are focused on technical search engine optimization. So we are thinking about things like the indexing of your pages and the speed of your pages, things like that. So speaking of indexing, if we scroll down the page, we can see how many pages of the site are indexed. So again, indexed means that someone can find it at all on Google. So if it's not indexed, so these 203 pages which aren't indexed, whatever you do with keywords or other things, no one will ever be able to find it. So this is a critical first step to look into what's going on with these 203 3 pages not indexed before you start worrying a lot about keywords, because regardless of your keywords, you're not getting anywhere. And we will, in fact, go into this in a lot of detail. We'll spend a lot of time in our session today talking about page indexing. At the bottom of the page, or next to the bottom of the page, you'll see experience. This shows a summary of what Google calls core web vitals, which are measures of mostly the speed of your site, though there's a couple of other things in there. This is a complicated site, complicated chart for what most sites should be seeing, which is simply everything looks good. Sorry, I didn't mean to click through on that. Everything looks good, and don't need to worry about this. So basically, nothing needs improvement, nothing is poor, everything is good. Great. HTTPS is a similar thing. This is a measure of whether you are using a particular type of protocol. And the answer here is you shouldn't be using anything that is non-HTTPS. You should be using everything that is HTTPS. And so you're looking simply for this all to be green. Just to quickly dive in here, because I'm not going to come back again. If these are, in fact, not all zeros, you are getting something that is, it's saying it needs improvement. You get a little bit more information. Now, you can see the trend here. You can see perhaps a little more information. Nope, that'll give you the index. There is a Google tool that will give you more information, which used to be called Google Lighthouse and now has a different name, and I've forgotten what it is. But that will tell you, if you Google Lighthouse, it will give you the right tool. You can go in and see the actual core web vitals for your site. So there's 5 or 6 of them, and you can see what is doing better or worse. You can't really honestly do much with that other than hand it over to a developer and say, can you please do something with this? Please increase the speed of my site, increase this particular web vital. Please help me with getting my pages into an HTTPS format. So these are mostly check to make sure they're looking good. If not, get a developer involved. This last section, enhancements. This is things that you've added in to for the benefit of search engines specifically. So this would be if you've added, for instance, schema or other things, you would likely know about things you have added that are showing up here. So this is more a box to check that it knows about the things you think that you've added, as opposed to something that you should expect to necessarily see something. Fabulous. So that is the overview of what you're going to see in Search Engine Console in general. I want to now dive into indexing and actually spend the rest of our time on indexing, which is a really key initial step to thinking about SEO. So on this particular site, we're going to look at a couple of sites, but on this particular site, we are, for instance, seeing 203 pages not indexed. So let's hit full report to understand more about why these pages aren't indexed. So there's a minimum or kind of the baseline problem that you might see, that I actually don't have any sites that are showing the problem, would be has the status not indexed, URL is unknown. So basically, we don't really know. We know this site, this URL somehow exists, but it's not really on our radar. So in some kind of weird contradiction in terms. It's also possible, especially as a small site and a new site, that it may tell you, all right, back in this indexing section, we are seeing 20 not indexed pages and 10 indexed pages. And you'll say, wait, what about my other 20 pages? And you won't be able to find them anywhere. And in that case, so you can, just to say it, so I can click through on any of these to see the actual URLs that it is finding in this status. So we've just clicked on something else. But if I was concerned about the non-indexed URL is unknown, or I was trying to figure out which URLs were missing, I could click through to try to find that out. Honestly, if there are URLs that are missing, or if the URL is unknown, or in almost any other situation, the first thing that you want to do is you want to put up a sitemap. So a sitemap is actually a basic setup step for Google Search Console. And you pretty much want to do this as one of the very first things that you're doing in Google Search Console. The only reason that I didn't have it as literally a setup step, so first you click on something to attach it to your site, and then you go and put in a sitemap, is I do think there is value in understanding how Google is looking at your site before, if you don't have a sitemap, before it sees the sitemap, to see if there are other indexing errors, other things that possibly could be remedied. Because putting up a sitemap is also one of the very best ways to get Google to robustly pay attention to your site. So if you've made changes in your site, putting up a new sitemap will get it to pay attention. And anything you do after that point will be less useful. So it's useful to wait until you have a decent, quick pass at things about indexing, which we'll talk about in more detail, before putting up a sitemap. So this site does not have a sitemap and is honestly pretty overdue for a sitemap. They really should get one up. And in fact, we'll see some issues that will hopefully be remedied by putting up a sitemap. What does a sitemap mean? So this is literally a page that sits under just your basic URL, sitemap.xml, which is a list of your pages. This is often automatically generated by your content management system. So if you're using something like WordPress or Squarespace or Drupal, almost certainly you have a sitemap.xml file without having done anything about it. If you go to this URL and there is nothing there, there are also generator tools you can use to create them. And I'll be sending out an article that has a link to a generator tool that you can use. So then you take this URL, you copy it, and you put it here. And in fact, I have access to the site. I could literally right now submit this sitemap. I kind of want to, but I'll, conceivably they have some reason for not having submitted it, so I won't because I don't have permission. But when you submit it, it will show up and it will look like this. So it will simply say, we submitted this sitemap, in this case, 3 years ago. It was a success. Here's how many pages it discovered. It does not generally do anything to submit the sitemap again. So once you've submitted it, it's submitted, it's done. Your sitemap should ideally be updated over time with new pages. If it is not, it is probably not a critical problem as long as you are internally linking to your own pages. So as long as it can find pages that you are putting up on your site, which if you're putting up pages on your site and they are not linked to from anywhere on your site, you probably have other problems. So that means that you've got pages that are not easily accessible to visitors. So that is a sitemap. Let us talk about other indexing problems. So I'm going to go back to the same, so we'll come back to this actually kind of awful looking, like, why are there 31,000 pages not indexed? We'll talk more about that. Oh, sorry, this is also the wrong side. Too many sides. So another key indexing error that particularly small website find is crawled, currently not indexed, or discovered and currently not indexed. And both of those are, so discovered is a little bit earlier. It basically says, all right, Google knows this thing exists and maybe we'll get to it. Possibly. Crawled, currently not indexed, is we looked at it and we actively decided not to index it. Now, what might these mean? So in general, so number one, put up a sitemap if you haven't put up a sitemap. Think about the quality of these pages. So crawled means it found it, but perhaps it had some doubts as to whether this page was actually a page that was going to help users. So is there a reasonable amount of information on that page? Is it just 2 sentences? So maybe it's not a page that looks like it has anything useful to Google. It doesn't look like it's only chock full of keywords to try to spam Google into including it. Are you doing anything that you think might be clever to get Google to trick Google? So in SEO, the maxim is always, you are not smarter than Google. Do not ever try to do anything that you think may outsmart Google, because somebody has definitely thought about it before. And like as not, Google will actually counteract it by just dropping those pages or dropping your whole site. If you are a small site and you don't have very many pages linking to you yet, so external sites or internal sites, that is a key reason why site pages might not be indexed. So this here we're looking at is my own site, so not a nonprofit site, but it's a small site with the majority of the pages on it are articles. So they are just particular information about a nonprofit websites. So, and you can kind of see here my war on non-indexed pages, which has been ongoing since about April or May. And I've had some success. I've gotten a fair amount of my pages indexed. Particularly, I've gotten a lot of pages that were discovered but currently not indexed down. I've also made a lot of good inroads on the pages that I cared about, that were crawled and currently not indexed. So it used to be that there were important articles in both of these categories. These days, when I look at this crawled, currently not indexed, these are all of these are issues of my newsletter. And in fact, oh, no, they're not. I was going to say they're all older. They're not all older, but none of them are brand new, at least. So they are issues that I don't care as much about as the brand new issues. And certainly, I don't care as much about people finding issues of my newsletter online as I do about them finding my actual articles online. So yes, and so what did I do in my kind of page by page attempt to get my pages indexed? The number one thing that I did, which was seemed to help a lot, is I gave thought to internal linking. So on my own website, I defined, all right, here are the 10 key articles that I care the most about, and I am going to link to them from other places. I created some additional kind of summary pages. So I said, okay, here's a summary of all of my user research articles, for instance. So I created that page and I linked to that page, and that page linked to other articles. This would be a great way to use also a footer sitemap. So to basically put something in the footer of your website, which says sitemap or says most popular articles or something like that, which is not actually intended that much for your users to find, but instead is intended as a list of important links for Google to use. Another thing that I did, which was shared online and worked for me, was to list some of my articles as, in fact, some of my newsletters in particular, as do not index. So I told it, okay, I don't care about this stuff. So you can drop those off. And I actually was going to do more, but then it seemed like it wasn't that important. I was getting them indexed anyway. So it is possible if you are like a local site, you don't have a lot of links in, you're a fairly new nonprofit, that Google isn't likely to immediately index more than some number of pages. So maybe it has decided, I think it's relatively likely that Google has currently decided that about 35 pages is what Laura S. Quinn gets until I start to prove my worth by having more click-throughs from Google, by having more links in from other sites. And so I need to help Google decide which 33-ish pages should be indexed. All right, so we're talking about reasons that pages might not be indexed. That is discovered currently not indexed and crawled currently not indexed. I want to spend, the only other one I'm going to spend a fair amount of time on is one that I see a relatively large amount and drives people insane with its impenetrable jargon, which is duplicate without user-selected canonical. So we are back on the Crime Victims Help site, and we can see, in fact, that there are 93 of the pages of our 200-odd pages that are not indexed because Google thinks that they are a duplicate without user-selected canonical. What on earth does that mean? So, whoops, sorry, I just sorted my reasons. Here, duplicate. So this means that it thinks that there is another page on the site. There is a duplicate page. And because so you being the user, so the user has not selected a correct page or a canonical page between those duplicates, Google has chosen, based on its, relatively thought through, but kind of knowably not great list of reasons, Google has chosen to not index this page because there's another page it thinks is the same. So sorry, just in less words. This means that Google has not indexed this page because it thinks that it is the same as a different page on the site, and it has indexed that other page instead. So is this a problem or not? This could absolutely not be a problem. And we're going to look at another site where there's a million of them and it does not look like a problem. But in order to know whether it's a problem, you really need to dive in. So we're going to do that by clicking through. All right, we're going to look at the 93 pages that it thinks are duplicates without user-selected canonicals. So, and I can see, wow, all right, my divorce page, that feels like an important page to me. There is no obvious duplicate in my mind of that page. I am going to look at this to inspect it, to see a couple things about it. Actually, this reminds me that I forgot to mention an important thing back when we were thinking about the currently not indexed. So crawled but not indexed, discovered not indexed. An important thing to check before you go nuts and drill down is to make sure that it actually isn't indexed. That there are times, and they're not completely obscure. It might be 1 in 10 or 2 in 10 that it appears in the list of pages that are not being indexed. But when you click through onto this page, it says, oh, the page is indexed. So it is not completely in sync with itself, which is annoying. And yeah, but it is important to check. Something else important I forgot to mention early on is that Google Search Console is not in sync with Google Analytics. So if you are using Google Analytics, and if you are trying to figure out, okay, why are the click-throughs not the same? What am I missing? Why are the keywords different? They are different in a number of aspects, including there is a time lag for the Search Console. It includes, some include JavaScript, some don't, technical reasons. So you should just use each of those for their own merits. You shouldn't expect them to be the same. All right, but back on duplicate without user-selected canonical. We are looking at this particular page, which is a divorce, and we are seeing what it thinks is the canonical, and what is the canonical, meaning what page it has indexed instead. So I can take this page and I can go look at it. So that's the quick exit button. So here's my divorce page. I had simply quickly pulled it up. Here's my divorce page. And here's my mediation and family law page. And looking at the two of these are clearly not the same page. And this is obviously a problem, that my divorce page is not currently being indexed. So, and you can see that, all right, nothing I can do with divorce is going to help this until we get this indexed. Why is this page not being indexed? Well, I have the benefit of having actually worked on this site, and I can tell you something that we are currently, if they would hopefully put up a sitemap, I think that would help um, uh, to get, so sorry, putting up a sitemap would help hopefully get Google to look at this and rethink through what it thinks are the canonicals and what are duplicates. There used to be a introduction blurb to this particular section, which is the family law section, and that introduction blurb was the same across everything that you can see in this subnav. There are still things that are the same across everything in the subnav, like you can see the titles of these pages are the same. So this says family law, this says family law. This should absolutely say divorce, and the other one should say mediation. They both have the same, I just happen to know this is a kind of a weirdly constructed subnav. That could also be a problem with these pages. So there are structural problems with these pages that are making, and which might be resolved. So this might be enough, hopefully it is, which might be enough to get Google to recognize that these are different, but it might not be. So this is the type of duplicate, no user selected canonical problem that you might need to get a developer in for. I am going to show you a different problem, which is also can be problematic, but in much less of a immediate way. So here's Law Help New York, which is showing 4.5 thousand pages indexed, which is pretty interesting because that's well more pages than it actually has. And another 31,000 pages that it hasn't indexed, which is, yeah, way more than it also has. So a lot of those pages in both categories, I can tell you, are things with parameters. It is, Google Search Console is kind of notoriously messed up by things that have parameters, which are this question mark. So question mark, stuff underneath, stuff after it. Like, so what does this question mark reference equals 3W? So this is, it's passing through from somewhere. You could also use this for source codes or other things. But it is thinking about these right now all as different pages, as opposed to simply what is meant by the site, which is, all right, strip off the thing after the question mark, and that's the real page. And that will get you thousands and thousands of extra pages, which certainly is a good idea in the long run to get out of there. Number one, it will, in bulk, it will, I was going to say it'll irritate Google. I love that it's hard not to talk about Google as an individual person. So Google has to do more work on your site because you've got all this extra stuff that it doesn't, that it thinks of pages are and are not actually. So having it be less work will have it potentially index more often. It will also make Google Search Console a lot easier to use. Right now, it's pretty hard, in fact, to know whether all the pages on the site are indexed because it's showing far more pages than there are. So are the correct, 600 pages all indexed? Who knows? Like you'd have to really dive in to figure that out. If you have a developer, this has a relatively easy fix, which is, I don't have a chat easily right now, but it'll go out in a key article that I'm going to send out with this webinar. It basically is, you put a self-referring rel tag in the header. So in the header, you put literally the words rel =, and then the URL of that specific page. So it basically, then everything with a parameter will refer back to, this thing without a parameter. All right, so that's a little technical. Basically, if you have this problem, you can grab a developer and it should be a very straightforward fix. All right, I'm going to wind up with how to get Google to think about your site and update the site after you've made a fix, which you would think would be really easy, and next time it comes around, everything would be updated. But unfortunately, that is not the case. So it's the reason that I did not put sitemap in the setup process is because it's worth having in your mind as, okay, if I am finding lots of things that are, particularly that are duplicated, stuff like that. A sitemap will help with duplicates, and a sitemap will certainly help with crawling. But if you're finding things that you're thinking might be structural, it really will help to do them first before you put the sitemap up in order simply to get it in. You might think as well that if I say crawled, currently not indexed. Oh, okay, I did a bunch of things that I think will fix, I mean, this seems unlikely, but will fix all 5,000 of these pages. I'm just going to hit this validate fix button. Let me show you an example of this. This is actually kind of entertaining. So I did this for I think for exactly that. So I did some work in terms of updating the quality of my site to, like, for instance, put myself on as an author and things like that. And I requested validation on 3.6. I only discovered in preparation for this webinar, it actually went through. But by that point, it was kind of, it didn't really matter because I had already been doing a ton of work by hand. So yeah, 3 months later, it did something. Not probably the time frame you're hoping for. If you want to get it to do something faster than that, unfortunately, the fastest way to probably do it is to put it in by hand so they either get there through the URL inspector, through clicking through on any of the others, or put it in by hand through this inspect any URL. There was something wrong with that. Oh, I'm in the wrong website is what's going on. So it's finding this. So this is not actually, and this would actually be on my divorce page. In fact, I'm actually going to do this because this is one of my clients and I want to know. Sorry, I'm actually going to do this because this is one of my clients and I want to know whether or not our fixes work. So for this particular page, I can request indexing. So it will see if it can literally find the page, if the page is up, stuff like that. And if it can be up, it'll say, all right, it's queued. And this will generally happen within a couple of days. This is obviously a little tedious if you've got 100 pages. It will also, unfortunately, crap out after about 15-ish in a row. So you'll need to come back like later the next day to order to do the next 15. So it's no one's favorite activity, but it will work, which is nice. If you have a busier site, which is more reliably indexed, then likely Google will fix things on its own eventually. So you can simply hang out and wait, and it will get things updated. Fantastic. So that is our recap of the Google Search Console webinar. Thank you so much for registering. If you attended, I apologize that we didn't have all of the interaction and excitement that we had from the live. Hopefully this is a reasonable substitute. Thanks so much, and I hope to see you at another seminar soon.